There are moments in corporate America when you know you're being stabbed in the back, but you choose to sit still and document every single detail. I didn't scream, didn't argue, didn't run to HR. I just smiled, opened a new file, and started writing. Each line became another brick paving the road to his downfall. And when Judgment Day arrived, it all came down to one Zoom call where the entire company watched a man's career disintegrate in real time. My name is Emily Carter, and I've spent 4 years building something I thought mattered at Northbridge Systems. The calendar notification popped up at 3:45 p.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other. Meeting with Mark Sullivan, Conference Room B, no subject line, no agenda, just my boss's name staring back at me from the screen like a digital omen. I remember the walk to that conference room, how my heels clicked against the polished concrete floors of our open-plan office, how the afternoon sun slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the rows of standing desks. My colleagues were deep in their screens, fingers flying across keyboards, the soft hum of productivity filling the air. None of them looked up. Why would they? This was just another meeting in a place where meetings consumed half our lives. Mark was already there when I arrived, seated at the head of the oak table. His laptop closed, a bad sign. He had that particular expression I'd seen him wear during layoffs, professionally neutral, with a hint of manufactured concern. His Patagonia vest was perfectly pressed, the company logo embroidered on the chest like a badge of corporate loyalty. "Emily, thanks for coming," he said, gesturing to a chair 3 seats away from him. The distance felt deliberate, calculated. I wanted to discuss some organizational changes we're implementing. I sat down, placed my phone face down on the table, and waited. In 4 years at Northbridge, I'd learned that silence often extracted more truth than questions. "We're restructuring the retention team," Mark continued, his fingers forming that little triangle that management consultants must teach in some secret workshop. "Your work on the churn prediction model has been valuable, but we need to pivot in a new direction." Pivot, that beautiful corporate euphemism that could mean anything from a minor adjustment to complete annihilation. "I'm moving you to a special project," he said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. "Project Atlas. It's a new initiative focused on internal knowledge management, very important for our long-term strategy." I picked up the paper. The job description was so vague it could have been generated by ChatGPT on a bad day. Knowledge synthesis, cross-functional alignment, strategic documentation initiatives, corporate word salad designed to mean nothing and everything simultaneously. "What about the churn models?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "The predictive analytics dashboard. We're finally seeing real results. Customer retention is up 12% this quarter alone." Mark's triangle collapsed, and he leaned back in his ergonomic chair. "Caleb Morrison will be taking over that aspect of the work. He brings fresh perspectives from his time at Tech Forward. Sometimes, Emily, we need new eyes on old problems." Caleb Morrison. I'd met him exactly twice, once at the coffee machine where he'd explained my own model to me incorrectly, and once in a team meeting where he'd used the phrase synergistic optimization without irony. Fresh perspectives, new eyes, more euphemisms to soften the blow of being sidelined. "This is effective immediately?" I asked, though the answer was obvious. "We'll transition over the next 2 weeks. Caleb will shadow you, learn the systems. I'm confident you'll give him all the support he needs." I nodded, gathered the paper, and stood up. Mark was already opening his laptop, our meeting dismissed from his mind before I'd even reached the door. "Emily," he called out as my hand touched the handle. "This is an opportunity. Project Atlas could be very visible if executed correctly." I turned back and smiled, the kind of smile I'd perfected over years of corporate survival. "Of course, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity." Back at my desk, I opened a new document on my personal Google Drive. Not the company account that would be stupid. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I typed the first line. October 15th, 3:45 p.m. Reassigned from churn management to Project Atlas. Caleb Morrison taking over 4 years of my work. I stared at that sentence, feeling something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. This wasn't anger. Anger was hot, impulsive, self-destructive. This was different. This was the birth of something patient and methodical. I minimized the document, opened Slack, and sent Caleb a message. Hey, heard you're taking over churn. Happy to walk you through everything. When works for you. His response was almost instant. Super pumped. How about tomorrow at 9? Can't wait to revolutionize this thing. Revolutionize. I almost laughed. Instead, I returned to my document and added a second line. October 15th, 4:20 p.m. Caleb confirms takeover. Uses word revolutionize. Begin documentation. Project Atlas turned out to be exactly what I'd suspected, a corporate graveyard where good employees went to be forgotten. My new desk was relocated to the 3rd floor, what we called Siberia, where the facilities team stored extra furniture and the HVAC system perpetually wheezed like an asthmatic runner. The window faced a concrete wall. Even the succulent someone had abandoned on the windowsill had given up, its leaves brown and crispy like burnt paper. My first Atlas assignment arrived via email at 8:30 a.m. on a Wednesday. Create comprehensive documentation for all internal processes related to customer onboarding from Q1 2019 to present. 4 years of processes that had been changed, revised, abandoned, and resurrected multiple times. Busy work designed to keep me occupied while my real work, my life's work, was being handed over to someone who thought KPI stood for Key Performance Indicator, but couldn't explain what made an indicator key. Meanwhile, 3 floors up in the land of natural light and functioning air conditioning, Caleb Morrison was conducting what he called the Great Reformation of my churn prediction system. I knew this because he'd added me to a Slack channel called #Churn Revolution, yes. Revolution, where he documented his every thought in real time like some kind of corporate stream of consciousness novel. Team, I've been diving deep into the existing models. He posted at 9:15, accompanied by a thinking emoji. Lots of opportunity for optimization here. The current dashboard is too complex. We need to simplify. I screenshotted that message. File name, Caleb Simplify octi19.png. The dashboard wasn't complex. It was comprehensive. There's a difference. But Caleb had never stuck around long enough in any role to learn it. Every metric on that dashboard existed because a customer had been lost without it. The early warning indicators for enterprise accounts, the seasonal adjustment factors for retail clients, the behavioral triggers that predicted churn 90 days out with 87% accuracy, 4 years of refinement, and he wanted to simplify. By the end of his first week, Caleb had renamed the dashboard from Predictive Churn Analytics to Customer Happiness Metrics. I'm not making this up. Customer Happiness Metrics. It's about reframing the narrative. He explained in the all-hands retention meeting I was somehow still invited to, probably by oversight. Instead of focusing on who's leaving, we celebrate who's staying. Mark nodded along like Caleb had just solved world hunger. Brilliant approach. Caleb, this is exactly the fresh thinking we needed. I watched from my corner seat as Caleb pulled up the new dashboard. Gone were the granular breakdowns by customer segment. Eliminated were the root cause analysis trees. The predictive modeling that could identify at-risk accounts before they even knew they were unhappy, replaced with a single green smiley face and the words, retention rate 94%. Clean, simple, executive-friendly, Caleb beamed, clicking through slides that looked like they'd been designed by a kindergarten teacher with access to PowerPoint. No more drowning in data, just clear, actionable insights. I raised my hand. How do you identify which accounts are at risk? Caleb's smile flickered. Well, the happiness score aggregates all the key indicators. Which indicators specifically? The important ones. Login frequency, support tickets, the usual suspects. The usual suspects. I opened my laptop and pulled up the original model documentation. What about payment delay patterns, contract renewal timeline analysis, feature adoption rates, competitive vendor evaluation signals? Those are all incorporated into the happiness score, Caleb said, his confidence draining like water from a punctured balloon. How exactly? What's the weighting algorithm? Mark intervened. Emily, I appreciate your engagement, but let's take detailed questions offline. Caleb's streamlining the approach for better executive visibility. I nodded and made another note in my growing document. October 23rd, 2:30 p.m. Caleb unable to explain algorithm weighting. Mark deflects questioning. After the meeting, I went back to Siberia and pulled up our customer database. Then I created a shadow system, a duplicate of all our churn data, feeding into my original models, running on my local machine, every day. I would compare Caleb's customer happiness metrics with what the real data was telling us. The first divergence appeared within a week. Global Tech, a $1 million enterprise account, showed multiple warning signals in my shadow system, decreased usage, 3 escalated support tickets, and their procurement team had started evaluating competitors. Caleb's happiness dashboard, green smiley face, 96% happiness score. I documented everything, screenshots, data exports, email chains. My Echo folder grew larger each day. A parallel universe where facts still mattered and numbers didn't lie to make executives feel better. 3 weeks into the Great Reformation, Caleb posted in #ChurnRevolution. Amazing news team, churn is down 20% since I took over, the simplified approach is working. Churn wasn't down. He'd just changed the definition. Previously, a customer was counted as churned the moment they gave notice. Caleb's new model. They weren't churned until their contract officially ended, which could be months later. He was essentially moving the goalposts and declaring victory. I added another file to echo churn definition, change NOV10 PDF. The beautiful thing about being invisible in Siberia was that nobody watched what I was doing. While Caleb revolutionized and Mark celebrated, I built my archive. Every falsified metric, every misrepresented trend, every ignored warning signal cataloged and cross-referenced like evidence in a case that hadn't gone to trial yet. But trials, I was learning, had a way of scheduling themselves. The November board meeting was Caleb's moment of triumph. I wasn't invited, of course, but corporate gossip travels faster than fiber optic cables. By lunch, everyone knew that Caleb had presented revolutionary retention numbers to the board. Churn was supposedly at an all-time low. Customer satisfaction had never been higher. The CFO himself had called it transformational leadership. I sat in Siberia, eating a sad desk salad, and pulled up the real numbers on my shadow system. We'd lost 3 enterprise accounts that week alone, but in Caleb's fantasy metrics, they were still engaged customers because their contracts hadn't officially expired. It was like counting someone as alive because their funeral hadn't happened yet. The Slack celebrations were nauseating. Mark posted in #General, huge kudos to Caleb Morrison for showing us what innovation looks like, churn down 35% in just 6 weeks. The responses flooded in emoji reactions, congratulations, digital high fives. I watched it all from my corner of exile, methodically screenshotting every false claim. File name, false celebration, nov15.png. But here's the thing about fake numbers, they're like a bad foundation. You can build a beautiful house on top, but eventually, reality starts seeping through the cracks. The first crack appeared in an unexpected place, the finance team. Sandra Williams from Accounts Receivable messaged me directly at 2:20 p.m. on a Thursday. Emily, weird question. Do you still have access to the old churn reports? Something's not adding up with our collections forecasting. I played dumb. I think Caleb manages all that now. What seems to be the issue? Well, his dashboard shows we have 94% retention, but I'm looking at actual revenue, and we're down 8% from last quarter. That math doesn't work unless our customers all simultaneously decided to pay less while staying happy. I suggested she might want to dig deeper into the payment patterns. Just a helpful hint from someone stuck in Siberia. Sandra was smart. She'd figure it out. The second crack came from legal. Tom Rodriguez needed historical churn data for a contract dispute. Caleb's simplified dashboard had aggregated everything into those meaningless happiness scores, erasing the granular data legal needed. The thing is, Tom told me over coffee in the break room, the client is claiming we should have warned them about service issues, but according to Caleb's dashboard, they were at 98% happiness right up until they terminated. I showed him how to access the archived data, the real data. His expression shifted from confusion to concern as he saw the warning signs that had been ignored for months. This is a liability issue, he muttered. If we knew and didn't act. The third crack was the most satisfying. It came from Caleb himself. He messaged me at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday, right when he probably thought I'd already left. "Hey, Emily. Quick question. The dashboard is showing some weird anomalies. Could you take a look?" I could have ignored it, could have let him stew in his own incompetence, but that wasn't the plan. The plan required precision. I went up to the 4th floor, to the desk that used to be mine. Caleb had personalized it with a collection of business books with titles like Disrupt or Die and The Innovation Mindset. He pulled up his dashboard, that kindergarten-colored monstrosity of oversimplification. "See this?" He pointed at a graph showing customer happiness trending steadily upward. "But then look at this." He switched to another screen showing actual login data, which was plummeting like a stone thrown off a cliff. I said, maintaining my poker face. "What aggregation formula are you using for the happiness score?" His eyes darted away. "The standard one." "Which standard?" "Patterson's weighted average, the Morrison confidence interval, basic mean calculation." It's proprietary." Proprietary. Code for, I have no idea what I'm doing. I leaned over and opened the query console. "Mind if I look at the back end?" What I found was worse than incompetence. It was negligence bordering on fraud. Caleb hadn't just simplified the dashboard. He'd hard-coded trending adjustments. If the real numbers went down, his formula automatically added a seasonal adjustment to keep everything green. If customer complaints increased, they were reclassified as engagement opportunities. It wasn't just moving the goalposts. It was playing an entirely different game and declaring yourself the winner. "You might want to document your methodology," I suggested innocently, "in case anyone asks for an audit." His face went pale. "An audit? Why would anyone audit this?" "Oh, probably no reason, but Sandra from finance was asking about some discrepancies, and Tom from legal mentioned something about liability issues. I'm sure it's nothing." I left him there, surrounded by his disruption books and fake metrics, frantically typing what I assumed were CYA emails to Mark. That night, I organized everything in my Echo folder into a single presentation, slide by slide, the truth versus the fiction, the real data versus the happiness scores, the ignored warnings versus the celebrated successes. 47 slides of meticulously documented reality. I saved it with a simple title, Q4 Retention Analysis, Actual versus Reported. Then I did something I'd been planning for weeks. I created an anonymous email account and sent the presentation to Lauren Daniels, our Chief of Staff. The subject line read, Potential Data Integrity Issues You Should Be Aware Of. Lauren was known for two things: her Stanford MBA and her absolutely zero tolerance for bullshit. She'd been the one to uncover the sales team's pipeline padding scandal 2 years ago. If anyone would recognize cooked books, it was her. I didn't sign the email. Didn't need to. The data would speak for itself. Monday morning arrived with the kind of electric tension that precedes corporate thunderstorms. Lauren had forwarded my presentation to the CEO with a note that was visible in the email chain. "We need to discuss this immediately. If even half of this is accurate, we have a serious problem." The storm was coming. I could feel it in the sudden flurry of closed-door meetings, the way Mark's assistant kept fielding calls with increasingly panicked expressions, the fact that Caleb had posted nothing in Hat or Churn Revolution for the entire morning. I sat in Siberia, working on my meaningless Project Atlas documentation, and smiled. The foundation was cracking. The house was about to fall. The beautiful thing about corporate truth is that once it starts leaking, it becomes a flood. I didn't need to orchestrate anything anymore. I just had to sit back and watch as different departments independently discovered what I'd known for weeks. It started with Sandra from finance. She'd taken my hint and dug deeper into the payment patterns. By Tuesday afternoon, she'd called an emergency meeting with her team. I knew because the conference room was right above Siberia, and Sandra's voice carried when she was upset. $8 million. Her voice filtered through the thin ceiling. We're missing $8 million in projected revenue because these accounts were marked as retained when they'd already given notice. Then came the domino effect I'd been waiting for. David Park from Customer Success pinged me on Slack at 3:10 p.m. "Emily, do you have a minute? Something weird is happening with my accounts." I climbed up to the 5th floor, where David sat surrounded by 3 monitors, all showing different data that refused to align. He looked like someone trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces had been cut from different boxes. "Look at this," he said, pulling up Global Tech's account. "Caleb's dashboard shows them at 92% happiness, but I just got off a call where they told me they're not renewing. They've been unhappy for months. Why didn't I get any alerts?" I leaned over his shoulder, playing the role of helpful former colleague. "What alert system are you using now?" That's the thing. Caleb eliminated the early warning system, said it was causing alert fatigue, and replaced it with weekly happiness summaries. Weekly summaries. I kept my voice neutral. "So you're finding out about problems?" A week late, at minimum. David rubbed his temples. "Emily, I've lost 4 accounts this month that showed as green on the dashboard. My commission is fucked. But worse, these were relationships I'd spent years building. If I'd known earlier." I suggested he document everything. "For your own records," I said, "in case anyone asks why these accounts were lost." David wasn't stupid. He knew exactly what I meant. Within an hour, he'd compiled his own report showing every account that had churned despite showing high happiness scores. He sent it to his manager, who sent it to Mark, who probably felt another crack forming in his carefully constructed narrative. Meanwhile, Tom from legal was conducting his own investigation. The contract dispute had escalated, and the client's lawyers were requesting all internal data about their account health. Tom needed the real metrics, not Caleb's happiness fantasies. He cornered me in the coffee room at 4:20 p.m. "Emily, I need everything, every report, every alert, every piece of data about Megacorp's account from the last year." "I don't have access to that anymore," I said, pouring myself a cup of burnt office coffee. "But the raw data should still be in the data warehouse. You just need to know which queries to run." I wrote down a few SQL queries on a napkin. Nothing complicated, just the basic polls that would show the real churn indicators we'd been tracking before Caleb's revolution. Tom's eyes widened as he ran the queries later. I knew because he immediately called legal's outside counsel, and phrases like material misrepresentation and breach of fiduciary duty started floating through the office grapevine. But the real catalyst came from an unexpected source, Julia Martinez, our newest board member. Julia had built 3 successful SaaS companies and had a bullshit detector refined by decades of experience. She'd been reviewing the board deck from Caleb's presentation and noticed something odd. She called Lauren Daniels directly. I know because Lauren's assistant, Kevin, told me about it while we waited for the perpetually broken printer on the 3rd floor. "Julia wants a full audit," Kevin whispered, glancing around nervously. "She said the retention numbers don't match the revenue numbers, and either we're lying to the board or someone's lying to us." The audit team descended on Thursday morning like corporate forensic investigators. They commandeered the large conference room, the one with the glass walls that let everyone see the storm brewing inside. Caleb was called in at 9:15 a.m. He walked in carrying his laptop and wearing his best "I've got this under control" smile. He walked out 45 minutes later, looking like someone had explained to him, in detail, the legal definition of fraud. Mark was next. He lasted an hour and emerged with the particular gray pallor of a middle manager realizing his career trajectory had just reversed direction. Then, surprisingly, they called me. I walked into the conference room at 11:30 a.m., carrying nothing but a cup of tea and wearing my best, confused but helpful expression. "Emily," Lauren Daniels said, her voice carefully neutral. "We understand you built the original churn prediction system." "Yes, for 4 years before the transition." "Can you explain the differences between your system and the current one?" I could have unloaded everything then. Could have shown them my Echo folder, revealed myself as the anonymous whistleblower, but that would have been too obvious, too vindictive. Instead, I simply explained, in technical detail, how a comprehensive churn prediction system should work. I discussed statistical models, predictive indicators, confidence intervals, all the things Caleb had dismissed as unnecessarily complex. "And the current system?" Lauren asked. "I wouldn't know the full details," I said carefully, "but from what I've observed, it seems to prioritize simplicity over accuracy." Lauren exchanged glances with the CFO. "Would you be able to reconstruct your original system? Show us what the real numbers would have looked like." "Of course," I said. "I maintain personal documentation of all my work. for professional development purposes. I spent the rest of the day in that conference room, walking them through months of real data, every account we'd lost while the dashboard showed green, every warning sign that had been aggregated into meaninglessness, every decision made on false information. I didn't editorialize, didn't assign blame, I just presented facts and let them draw their own conclusions. By 5:45 p.m., the audit team had everything they needed. Lauren thanked me for my time and asked if I could prepare a full comparison report by Monday. "Oh," she added as I was leaving, "we'll need you to present this to the full board. They're flying in for an emergency meeting." I nodded, maintaining my composure until I reached the stairwell. Then, alone in that concrete echo chamber, I allowed myself a small smile. The unwitting allies had done their jobs perfectly. Finance had found the revenue gaps. Customer success had documented the relationship failures. Legal had identified the liability. The board had demanded accountability. And I was just a helpful employee who'd maintained good documentation. The chess pieces were all in position. The king was in check. Monday's board meeting would be checkmate. The weekend before the board meeting, I transformed Siberia into a war room, 3 monitors displaying different data streams, printed charts covering every available surface, and my laptop running continuous queries against our database. I wasn't just preparing a presentation, I was building an airtight case. Saturday morning at 7:30 a.m., I started recording everything, not meetings or conversations that would be illegal, but my screen, as I worked through the data, creating what would become the most comprehensive audit trail in Northbridge's history. Every query I ran, every data point I validated, every discrepancy I uncovered, all captured in pristine 4K resolution. The beautiful thing about Caleb's incompetence was that he'd never revoked my database access. He'd been so confident in his revolution that he'd forgotten the first rule of corporate coup d'etat: always change the locks. I started with the fundamentals, creating a document titled Ignored Warnings Q3-Q4. Using our original prediction model, I identified every customer who'd shown early warning signs: support ticket escalation, usage decline, feature abandonment. Then I cross-referenced these with Caleb's happiness scores from the same periods. The contrast was staggering. Technova Industries. My model showed 7 red flags starting in September. Caleb's dashboard 95% happiness until they terminated in November. Meridian Solutions. Critical warning indicators for 6 consecutive weeks. Caleb's metric. Steady green, fully engaged. Apex Financial. Their entire development team had stopped using our API. Caleb's assessment. Minor seasonal adjustment in engagement. Each comparison got its own slide, complete with timestamps, data sources, and the actual customer communication confirming they'd left because of issues we'd failed to address. I wasn't just showing that Caleb was wrong, I was demonstrating systematic negligence. By Sunday afternoon, I'd compiled everything into 3 separate documents. The first was the official board presentation, 40 slides of carefully neutral, fact-based analysis. The second was my personal backup, containing every piece of supporting evidence. The third was something special, a timeline showing every instance where Mark or Caleb had been warned about issues and chosen to ignore or suppress them. That evening, I did something cathartic. I printed every false claim Caleb had made in Hajj Churn Revolution, every revolutionary improvement, every game-changing innovation, every celebration of fake success. I arranged them chronologically on my living room floor, a paper trail of corporate delusion stretching across 12 feet of hardwood. Then I created my masterpiece, a simple Excel file called Reality Check, 2 columns: what was reported and what actually happened. 67 rows of lies, each one meticulously documented and verified. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling. Pathetic fallacy at its finest. I dressed carefully, my best suit, the one I'd worn to my initial interview at Northbridge. Professional, competent, forgettable. I wasn't the star of this show. I was just the narrator revealing the plot. The board had commandeered the executive conference room on the 7th floor, the one with the mahogany table and portraits of former CEOs watching from the walls. I arrived at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, and began setting up my presentation. Lauren Daniels arrived next, followed by the CFO. then the board members filing in with the particular solemnity reserved for corporate disasters. Julia Martinez, the board member who'd started asking questions, sat directly across from where Mark and Caleb would be positioned. Mark entered at 8:58, wearing the haunted expression of someone who'd spent the weekend updating his resume. Caleb followed, his usual swagger replaced by something that looked like barely controlled panic. They sat together but left a chair between them, as if professional failure might be contagious. The CEO, Richard Townsend, called the meeting to order at exactly 9 a.m. "We're here to review discrepancies in our retention reporting," he said, his voice carrying the kind of controlled anger that preceded executive executions. "Emily, please present your findings." I stood, clicked to my first slide, and began the systematic destruction of everything Caleb had built. "Over the past quarter," I began, "our reported retention rate was 94%. Our actual retention rate was 78%. The room went silent. Julia Martinez leaned forward. I clicked to the next slide. This 16-point discrepancy represents approximately $12 million in lost annual recurring revenue that was reported as retained. Click. Here's how it happened. I walked them through Caleb's methodology or lack thereof, the redefined metrics, the suppressed warnings, the automated adjustments that turned red flags into green lights. I kept my voice neutral, letting the data speak for itself. "This shows Global Tech's actual engagement metrics," I said, displaying a graph that looked like a ski slope. "And here's what was reported to leadership. A flat, happy line." How Richard Townsend's single word carried more weight than most speeches. I clicked to the technical slides, showing the actual code Caleb had implemented. The happiness algorithm includes what's called a normalization factor. In practice, this means any negative trend is automatically adjusted upward to maintain baseline metrics. "That's not normalization," Julia Martinez said slowly. "That's falsification." Caleb started to speak. "I can explain." "Please do," Richard said, his tone suggesting that no explanation would suffice. Caleb launched into a frantic word salad about innovation and disruption and new paradigms. Mark tried to support him, mentioning the need for simplified executive reporting. They were drowning, and every word was another weight pulling them under. I continued my presentation, showing slide after slide of evidence. Customer emails asking why their concerns weren't addressed, internal communications where warnings were dismissed. The audit trail was complete, undeniable, damning. But I saved the best for last. "This final slide," I said, "shows every customer we've lost in the past quarter, along with the date our original system identified them as at risk, and the date they were reported as churned in the current system. The gap averaged 45 days. 45 days of pretending problems didn't exist. 45 days of lost opportunities to save accounts. In total," I concluded, "the delayed and misreported churn data has resulted in approximately $23 million in preventable losses." The room erupted, board members demanding explanations, the CFO calculating liability exposure, Julia Martinez asking about potential securities fraud if these numbers had been reported to investors. Through it all, I stood quietly at the front of the room, my presentation frozen on that final, devastating slide. Richard Townsend raised his hand for silence. "Emily, do you have all this documented? Every piece of data, every source, every timestamp?" I confirmed. "I maintain comprehensive records." He nodded, then turned to Mark and Caleb. "Gentlemen, please wait outside. The board needs to discuss this privately." They left, Caleb stumbling slightly as he stood, Mark's face the color of old paper. Richard turned back to me. "Thank you, Emily. Please stay. We'll have questions." For the next 2 hours, I answered every query, provided every detail, explained every discrepancy. I was the prosecution's star witness in a trial where the verdict was already decided. When we finally broke for lunch, Lauren Daniels pulled me aside. "The anonymous email," she said quietly. "The one that started this investigation." I met her gaze steadily. "What about it?" She studied me for a moment, then smiled the sharp smile of someone who recognizes a kindred strategic spirit. "Nothing," she said. "Just wanted to thank whoever sent it." The aftermath of the board meeting was like watching a corporate Jenga tower collapse in slow motion. By Monday afternoon at 2:30 p.m., Mark and Caleb had been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. By Tuesday, forensic accountants had taken over the fourth floor. By Wednesday, the reality of our situation had spread through Northbridge like wildfire. But the real unraveling happened in the details, the small, desperate moves of men who knew they were caught. Tuesday morning, I found Caleb at my old desk when I arrived at 7:45 a.m. He was frantically clicking through screens, trying to access the database. "Emily," he said, not looking up, "I need your help. Some of the data isn't matching what I presented, and I think there might be a system error." A system error. Even now, facing complete professional destruction, he couldn't admit what he'd done. "My access was revoked yesterday," I said truthfully. The IT team had locked down everything the moment the investigation began. "But you have backups, right? Personal copies." His eyes were bloodshot, desperate. "You always document everything." I tilted my head. "Why would you need my documentation? Caleb, don't you have your own records of the revolutionary changes you made?" He actually flinched. "Look, Emily, we're all on the same team here. If the company goes down, we all go down." "The company isn't going down," I said quietly. "Just the people who lied to it." I left him there, still clicking uselessly through locked systems, trying to find data that would save him, data that, ironically, only existed in my Echo folder, the evidence of his guilt, not his innocence. The rest of the week became a cascade of revelations. Sandra from finance discovered that Caleb had been reporting churned customers as in negotiation to buy himself time. Tom from legal found 3 more instances where we'd potentially breached contracts by failing to provide service-level guarantees to customers our system showed as happy. But the moment that truly marked the beginning of the end came from an unexpected source, Caleb's own assistant, Marcus. Marcus approached me Thursday afternoon while I was eating lunch in the cafeteria. He sat down nervously, glancing around before speaking. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," he said quietly, "but Caleb's been deleting files, like massive amounts of data. Yesterday, he asked me to help him clean up the shared drive." I kept my expression neutral. "That sounds like destroying evidence." "That's what I thought. So I made copies first, before deleting anything." He pulled out a USB drive. "I don't know what to do with this." "You should give it to Lauren Daniels," I said. "Today, right now. Actually." Marcus nodded and left. An hour later, I saw security escorting Caleb from the building, his laptop and phone confiscated. Destroying evidence had transformed this from an internal investigation to a potential criminal matter. Mark lasted another day. Friday morning. His resignation letter appeared in everyone's inbox at 9 a.m. sharp. It was a masterpiece of corporate non-admission. To focus on new opportunities. Grateful for my time at Northbridge. Wishing the team continued success. Not a word about the disaster he'd overseen. But Lauren Daniels wasn't interested in letting him slink away quietly. She forwarded his resignation to the entire company with her own addition. Mark Sullivan's resignation has been accepted effective immediately following the discovery of significant failures in leadership and oversight. Northbridge has a zero-tolerance policy for misrepresentation of critical business metrics, the corporate equivalent of a public execution. That afternoon, Richard Townsend called an all-hands meeting. The entire company gathered in the main conference area, with remote employees joining via Zoom. The atmosphere was electric with anxiety and anticipation. Richard didn't mince words. "We've uncovered systematic misreporting of customer retention data. This has cost us millions in revenue and, more importantly, damaged our relationship with clients who deserved better." He outlined the changes, new oversight procedures, mandatory data integrity training, a complete rebuild of our analytics infrastructure, and then he said something that made my heart rate spike. "Emily Carter will be leading the retention analytics rebuild. She'll report directly to Lauren Daniels and have full authority to implement necessary changes." I hadn't been told about this. I sat frozen as hundreds of eyes turned to me. Lauren caught my gaze and nodded slightly. This had been her idea. After the meeting, she pulled me into her office. "You saved this company," she said bluntly. "The board knows it. I know it. Hell, I think even you know it." I started to deflect, but she held up a hand. "I don't care if you sent that anonymous email. I don't care if you planned this whole thing. What I care about is that you had the intelligence to document everything and the patience to let the truth come out naturally." She slid a paper across her desk. A new offer letter. The salary was double what I'd been making. "Build it right this time," she said. "And if anyone tries to simplify your work again, you have my direct line." I signed the letter. That evening, as I packed up my things in Siberia to move back to the 4th floor actually, to a corner office on the 6th floor, I pulled up my Echo folder one last time. 63 gigabytes of evidence, hundreds of screenshots, thousands of data points. I selected all and hit delete. The evidence had served its purpose. The truth had won. But I did keep one thing, a screenshot of Caleb's last message in How Churn Revolution, posted the morning of the board meeting, excited to share our incredible success story today. Revolution accomplished. I printed it and pinned it to my new office wall, a reminder that in corporate America, the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. My phone buzzed with a text from David Park. "Drinks tonight? The whole team wants to celebrate your promotion and possibly hear the real story of how you took down the revolution." I smiled and typed back, "First round's on me, but the real story. That's just between us and the duh." Some victories are best savored quietly, but that didn't mean I couldn't enjoy watching others figure out exactly how thoroughly they'd been outplayed. The retention team was mine again. The data would never lie on my watch. And somewhere in Seattle, Caleb Morrison was updating his LinkedIn, probably describing his time at Northbridge as driving transformational change in customer analytics. Some people never learn. The quarterly business review was scheduled for December 15th, 3 weeks after the implosion. This wasn't just any QBR. This was the meeting where we'd have to explain to our biggest clients and investors how we'd been lying to them for months. The board insisted on full transparency, which meant someone had to stand in front of a room full of justifiably angry stakeholders and explain exactly how badly we'd fucked up. That someone, naturally, was supposed to be Mark, but Mark was gone. His corporate email already bouncing back auto-replies about his new ventures. Caleb. His lawyer had advised him not to attend any company functions pending the investigation, which left Richard Townsend himself to deliver the bad news. But Richard was smart enough to know he needed backup specifically. Someone who could explain the technical details and, more importantly, show how we were fixing it. "Emily," he said, calling me into his office on Monday morning at 8 a.m. sharp. "I need you on stage with me at the QBR." I'd expected this. To explain the new system. To explain everything, the old system, what went wrong, the cover-up, and yes, the new system. He leaned back in his chair, looking every one of his 58 years. "The board wants complete transparency. We show them everything, or we lose their trust forever." The QBR was held in the Marriott downtown, in a ballroom that could hold 300 people. Every major client sent representatives. Investors flew in from both coasts. The press wasn't officially invited, but everyone knew tech reporters would be there, pretending to be analysts. I spent the week preparing 2 presentations. The first was Richard's a careful corporate mea culpa that acknowledged mistakes without admitting legal liability. The second was mine, a brutal, technical autopsy of how one man's ego had nearly destroyed our company's credibility. The morning of the presentation, I arrived at 6:30 a.m. to test every piece of equipment. Nothing could go wrong with the technical side. The irony would be too much. I ran through my slides one more time, each one a nail in the coffin of Caleb's revolution. By 9 a.m., the ballroom was packed. I recognized faces from Fortune 500 companies, venture capital firms, and 3 of our biggest clients who were actively considering lawsuits. The energy in the room wasn't just tense, it was hostile. Richard opened with his apology, professionally delivered, but hollow-sounding in the vast space. "We failed you," he said. "We failed to maintain the integrity of our data, failed in our oversight, and failed to detect systematic misrepresentation of critical metrics." A hand shot up from the global tech contingent. "How do we know you're not lying to us right now?" Richard nodded to me. "Emily Carter, our new head of analytics, will show you exactly what happened, with complete transparency. I walked to the podium, my laptop connected to the massive screens behind me. The first slide appeared a photo of our old dashboard, the one I'd built over 4 years, dense with data and warning signals. This was our retention analytics system as of October 14th, I began. It tracked 47 distinct indicators across 7 categories. It predicted churn with 87% accuracy at 90 days out. Click, Caleb's simplified dashboard appeared, with its cartoonish smiley faces and green lights. This is what replaced it. A murmur rippled through the audience. Someone actually laughed bitter, incredulous. Let me show you what this simplification cost us. And you? I pulled up Global Tech's account history. Global Tech. Your team started showing signs of dissatisfaction in early September. Usage dropped 30%. Support tickets increased by 300%. Your development team stopped accessing our API. The Global Tech representatives leaned forward. Our original system flagged you as critical risk on September 12th. The simplified system, I clicked to Caleb's dashboard, showed you at 95% happiness until the day you terminated. We asked for those warnings, the Global Tech CEO said, his voice carrying across the room. We specifically requested early alerts. You should have received 17 alerts between September and November, I confirmed. You received none. They were all suppressed by the happiness algorithm. I moved through more examples, each one drawing gasps or angry muttering. Meridian Solutions had been labeled engaged, while their entire team was evaluating competitors. Apex Financial had been shown as stable during a complete collapse in usage. Then I showed them something that made the room go completely silent. This is an email chain from October 28th, I said, displaying a carefully redacted thread. A customer success manager raised concerns about discrepancies in the data. The response from leadership was, quote, "Focus on the narrative, not the noise." Who sent that response? Someone called out. The individuals responsible are no longer with the company, Richard interjected quickly. I continued for another 20 minutes, laying out the full scope of the deception. But I didn't just show the problems, I showed the solution. This is our new system, launching January 1st, I said, pulling up a development environment. Every suppressed feature has been restored. Every algorithm is transparent and auditable. Every client will have direct access to their raw data, not just processed metrics. How do we know you won't just hide things better? The question came from Julia Martinez, who joined the audience despite being on the board. I'd been waiting for this, because you're going to help us build it. We're creating a client advisory board with full access to our codebase. You'll see every calculation, every data point, every decision in real time. The mood shifted slightly, still angry, but now tinged with interest. Furthermore, I added, we're implementing blockchain logging for all metric calculations. Once a number is recorded, it cannot be altered or deleted without leaving an immutable trail. Who's overseeing this? The Apex Financial representative asked. I report directly to Lauren Daniels, who reports to the board, but more importantly, you'll oversee it. The Client Advisory Board will have veto power over any changes to the analytics system. For the first time, some faces in the audience looked less hostile. The Q&A lasted another hour. Every question was a dagger, but I had data for shields and transparency for armor. When it finally ended, the room didn't applaud, but they didn't walk out either. As people filed out for lunch, the Global Tech CEO approached me. That data you showed, he said quietly. Do you have all of it? Everything from the past year. Every bit, I confirmed. We're going to need it for our internal review, to figure out what we missed on our end. I handed him a USB drive I'd prepared specifically for this request. Everything's there, the real data, not the happiness scores. He pocketed it and paused. You were the anonymous whistleblower, weren't you? I met his gaze steadily. I'm just someone who believes data should tell the truth. He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen all day. Well, Emily, you've got 1 quarter to prove this new system works. Don't fuck it up like your predecessors. As the ballroom emptied, I stood behind the podium, looking at the last slide still displayed on the massive screens. It was a simple statement. Trust is earned in drops and lost in gallons. We're ready to start earning again. One drop at a time. Richard appeared beside me. You know Caleb's watching the live stream, right? I hadn't known there was a live stream, but it didn't surprise me. Good, I said. He should see what accountability looks like. Legal wants to know if you have any other documentation they should be aware of. I thought of my deleted Echo folder, of the complete archive I'd destroyed. No, I said. Everything important was in the presentation. Richard studied me for a moment, then nodded. The board approved your budget request. By the way, you can hire your own team. No more forced partnerships. I allowed myself a small smile. I already have a list. As I packed up my laptop, my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Caleb Morrison had updated his status, exploring new opportunities in transformational leadership. Some people really never learn. But that was fine. The tech world was smaller than people thought. Word traveled fast about executives who cooked books and blamed system errors. His revolution was over. Mine had just begun. The final act came 3 months later. On a gray Tuesday morning in March, I was reviewing Q1 retention metrics, real ones, accurate to the decimal point, when Lauren Daniels knocked on my office door at 9:15 a.m. You need to see this, she said, pulling up a Zoom link on her phone. It was a bankruptcy hearing, Caleb's new startup. Disrupt Flow Analytics had crashed and burned in record time. Apparently, he'd convinced some naive investors that he could revolutionize business intelligence with his happiness-first methodology. They'd given him $2 million in seed funding. He'd burned through it in 10 weeks. But that wasn't why Lauren was showing me this. The real show was about to begin. The judge was reviewing the fraud allegations. It turned out Caleb had used falsified Northbridge metrics as proof of his success in his investor pitch deck. The same fake numbers that had gotten him fired were now Exhibit A in an investor lawsuit. Mr. Morrison, the judge said, his voice tinny through the phone speaker. Can you explain why these metrics don't match Northbridge Systems' official audit results? Caleb's face on the small screen was a study in panic. There must be some misunderstanding, Your Honor. Those were the official numbers when I left the company. The investor's lawyer spoke up. We have a sworn affidavit from Northbridge's head of analytics stating these numbers were fabricated. Would you like to revise your statement? That affidavit was mine. I'd written it 2 weeks ago when the lawyers reached out. Just facts, no editorializing, but facts, as I'd learned, were more damaging than any accusation. Caleb tried to blame me, then Mark, then the system, then market conditions. Each excuse made him sink deeper. By the time the hearing ended at 10:30 a.m., he was facing potential criminal fraud charges. His career wasn't just over, it was radioactive. Did you know this was coming? Lauren asked, studying my face. I knew the investors would eventually check the numbers, I said carefully. Due diligence has a way of revealing truth. She smiled that sharp smile of hers. Remind me never to get on your bad side, Emily. After she left, I turned back to my monitors. 3 screens showing real-time retention data, customer health scores, and predictive analytics. No happiness faces, no simplified dashboards, no lies, just truth. Complicated and sometimes ugly, but always honest. My team, the one I'd handpicked, was doing incredible work. David Park was running customer success with surgical precision. Sandra from finance had joined us to ensure revenue and retention metrics stayed aligned. Even Marcus, Caleb's former assistant, had proven himself invaluable as a data analyst. He had a gift for spotting patterns and, more importantly, the courage to report problems. We'd recovered most of the lost clients. Global Tech had not only renewed but expanded their contract. The client advisory board had become a model for transparency that other companies were starting to copy. We were writing case studies about our failure and recovery, turning our disaster into a teachable moment. But the real validation came that afternoon. Richard Townsend called an all-hands meeting at 2 p.m. When I arrived at the main conference room, I noticed cameras set up and realized this was being broadcast to the entire company, including remote offices. 6 months ago, Richard began, we nearly lost everything because we prioritized perception over reality. Today, I'm announcing that our Q1 retention rate, the real rate, verified by external auditors, is 91%. the highest in company history. The room erupted in genuine applause, not the forced enthusiasm of Caleb's fake victories, but real celebration of real achievement. This success belongs to many people, Richard continued, but particularly to Emily Carter, who had the courage to document the truth when everyone else was celebrating lies. As people applauded, I thought about the journey from Siberia to this moment, the late nights building shadow systems, the careful documentation, the patient waiting while others discovered what I already knew. It hadn't been about revenge, really. It had been about something simpler and more powerful, refusing to let lies become truth. That evening, I was the last one in the office, watching the sunset over the city from my 6th-floor window. My computer dinged with a news alert. Former tech executive Caleb Morrison charged with wire fraud. The article included a photo from his glory days, standing in front of his revolutionary dashboard with that confident smile. I closed the alert and pulled up our current dashboard complex. Comprehensive and completely honest, every metric told a story, and every story was true. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a simple message. "You were right. I should have listened. Mark." I deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, weren't worth rebuilding. As I packed up to leave, I took one last look at the printout still pinned to my wall. Caleb's final message about his revolutionary success. It served as a daily reminder that in the world of data, truth isn't just a moral imperative, it's a strategic advantage. The revolution he'd promised had indeed happened, just not the way he'd planned. I turned off the lights and headed home, leaving behind a company that had learned the hard way that numbers don't lie, but people do. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't destroying those people. It's simply letting their lies destroy themselves while you quietly, methodically, build something true. The next morning, there would be new data to analyze, new patterns to discover, new truths to uncover. But tonight, I'd pour myself a glass of wine and toast to the power of patience, documentation, and the beautiful inevitability of facts. Because in the end, the truth didn't need a revolution. It just needed someone willing to write it down. Thank you all for listening to this story of corporate revenge and redemption. I'm curious, where are you listening to this story right now? Are you on your commute, at home, maybe even in your own office plotting your next move? Drop a comment below and let me know. If you enjoyed this tale of patience and calculated justice, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about workplace revenge. Have you ever watched someone's lies catch up with them? Let's discuss in the comments below.